Welcome to the new sound of online radio. Welcome to the sound of Universal Broadcasting Network. 'Cause you make me feel like I've been locked out of heaven. A mix of today's hits and hard-to-find favorites, combined with the most entertaining and intriguing talk anywhere. This is your sound. This is the sound of Universal Broadcasting Network at ubnradio.com.
And good afternoon, everyone. So happy to be here with you today. Welcome to Distill It. Woo! Sorry about that. Welcome to Distill It. Sorry, guys. I do that every freaking week. One of these days, I'm going to figure it out.
You just need
right?
an echo.
I need an echo. I like to hear myself.
Yeah.
I do.
Background
I really
noise.
do.
Why not?
Anyway, welcome to Distill It, a 360-degree view of life and sports. We are very happy to be here. My name is Wendy Rosenthal, and my lovely co-hostess with the mostest, Eira Switzer.
Switzer. Someday you'll get my last name right.
Never.
We've only known each other for a few years.
I
been
like to
in
mess
business
with
together
you. I like to mess with you.
Whatever her name is. Eira, she's here.
She's here, and we are very excited to be here today because we have a great topic for you. We have an amazing guest, and we are here on this amazing network every other Tuesday, UBN Broadcasting Network. But we're actually here again just a week later than we were last week because we had a little bit of a break. So it's kind of exciting to be here two weeks in a row. Yep. Exactly. Eira and I are the owners of a company called the Distillery Inc. We work with athletes to help them envision and manifest a new life for themselves after their sports career at whatever level that means. And that makes us sort of experts on sports, I'd say a little bit, but mostly huge fans of sports.
Huge fans, exactly.
Which is why we do this show, because we really believe that sports is a metaphor for life and that everything we talk about on this show actually kind of mirrors itself in everyday life. So we hope that everybody who tunes in gets that message as well.
Yeah.
I want to say hello to our faithful and reliable and wonderful engineer and security blanket, Mr. Jarvis.
Hello, ladies.
Yay.
How are you?
Mic'd up this week. I like that.
Jarvis is mic'd up this week because I suspect he is going to get very excited about this topic and he's going to want to join in because when we talked about sports and social justice about a month or so ago, I touched on Colin Kaepernick. We touched on Colin Kaepernick and his decision to kneel during the national anthem. And Jarvis was not excited about my position at the beginning of the conversation. You got him very worked up. And he was going to jump in, and then I kind of softened my position, and he stayed out. So I figured if he's going to jump in at all, this will be the week that he's going to do it, because that is what we are going to talk about today. Not just Colin Kaepernick, but this, Colin Kaepernick, the incident that happened or the protest that he made was now last year, more than a year ago.
Right.
And, kind of went along quietly. And, unfortunately for Colin Kaepernick, it has had an impact on his career.
A huge impact on his career. But it hasn't been nearly as impactful as it sort of has in the last week because we've got a whole new voice.
A lot of voices. A lot of voices. And it's very interesting how it kind of, went away as a topic. And then all of a sudden over the last 3 weeks and with the insertion of President Trump's comments on the idea of kneeling during the national anthem, it has risen again to be such a hot topic we couldn't ignore it, even though we've already talked about it.
Right.
So that's what we're going to talk about today. To help us do that is a very good friend of mine who we'll bring on in a moment, a sports presenter and a wonderful person and an avid sports fan who I can tell you I've stayed up many a night in London watching Super Bowls at 3 a.m. with this man, good friend Marshall Norbal, who was going to come on and help us see this from all perspectives, but also we wanted an international perspective.
Exactly.
Because we're wondering if people think we're crazy Americans. Anyway, before we get there, I want to invite all of you who are on Facebook Live to comment. We want to hear your voice. If you would like to call in, we do have a call-in number, which is 323-284-7826. Jarvis, I'm sure we'll put that up on the screen. As we do every show, we talk about what's gone on in the world of sports over the last couple of weeks.
USC lost.
Okay,
that's all we had to say.
We're not saying one more word about it.
Yeah.
And in fact, that's taking a backseat really to, some really chaotic and tragic things that have happened over the last week. And this show is not about that, but we do want to send our thoughts, prayers, love, spiritual energy to all those who either lost their lives, their families who are suffering from injuries from the incidents that happened in Las Vegas.
So many things happening all around the world. I mean, Spain and the hurricanes. It's been a really, really tough time.
France.
So our hearts are with people all over the world.
We are. And really, the message is all about love, folks. Start loving people. When you love people, you can't hate and you can't hurt people. So. Yeah. Okay. Also, we wanted to acknowledge the fact that, hey, the baseball season has ended. And
tell us about the Dodgers.
Our LA Dodgers. Best record in all of Major League Baseball. We head now into the playoffs. So a very exciting time. And I can only say I like to see the Dodgers in the World Series. I like to see them win the World Series,
exactly.
but at least
Go
get to
Dodgers.
the World Series.
So fun.
Go Dodgers. And another crazy NFL weekend, I have to say. Marshall and I have a little pool, and I got to tell you, Marshy, I really did bad this week. It was crazy. Like, again, a second week where underdogs were, beating people they shouldn't have beat. We had a crazy Monday night end to the Monday Night Football game with the Chiefs getting a fluke touchdown with 4 seconds to go when the Redskins decided to try and do something odd and crazy with 4 seconds to go, which probably sent the bookies over the edge because the Chiefs ended up covering the spread, which they wouldn't have if they just took a knee and finished. Yep. So what an appropriate thing to actually say, take a knee and finish. With that, we want to move quickly into our topic because I know that there are going to be a lot of people who want to chime in. Just to acknowledge, first of all, we have some friends watching us from overseas. We've got Zippy Glinsman's on the line. Thank you so much for watching again. Oh, Petra from England. Like, I think Marshall's got the word out, and our friends from England are watching, and Leah Gillis again from Paris.
Yay, Leah.
Yeah, so we really appreciate it. Please send your comments as we go on. I want to introduce now Mr. Marshall Norbal from London. Marshall, I am going to let you give our listeners and viewers a little bit of background on who you are, besides being, a very, very, very dear person to me. Welcome.
Hello, Wendy. Hello, Eira. Hello, everyone who's listening and watching. I'm a sports broadcaster. I have been for the last 5 years now. I mainly focus on working with the Premier League and the Bundesliga football, and a few kind of conversational sports programs around the NBA and also boxing. And that's mainly based for our African network that I work with, a company called Star Times, and I do some global feed work for the Premier League as well. And I'm a sports fan at heart. It's in the blood. It's when I was born, the first thing I can remember was a football, and watching it and playing it. And my love is just not soccer, as it's more commonly known in the States, but it's also NFL. NBA, as I mentioned, baseball, as you mentioned, it's the playoff, and also ice hockey, where this new season starts tomorrow.
Yeah, it does.
So I'm a sports fan. I'm the type of guy who will just find a sport and be like, what is this sport? Why don't I know about it? And I need to find out about it.
So I want you to know that Marshall helped me understand both rugby and cricket, and I actually helped him finally understand baseball.
Well, those are not easy things to do.
They aren't.
Actually.
No, Marshall was very good at helping me see it in the most simple way.
Yeah,
so,
I'm impressed.
Yeah. No,
3 great games.
Yeah. So we spent a lot of time in London. For those of you who don't know, I lived there for 10 years. talking sports between us. And funny enough, and then we'll go on to the real topic, Marshall and I actually thought about writing a blog together to have the female perspective of sports, because
so great.
We would have these great late night conversations about, you know, everything that was going on. So I'm really happy to be able to bring him here as an expert, actually.
Yeah.
So why don't we jump into it, Marshall? And let's start with a little bit. You guys had a NFL game in London this week. Do you remember? We went to the first one.
Did you really?
Few,
Yeah. I mean, we would go every year when there was only one. Now there's 4 this year, which is amazing in and of itself. But both teams, the Dolphins and the Saints, did have people who knelt during the national anthem.
Yeah.
And there was actually a lot of conversation about it. I saw in the press here about them doing it there.
Very much so.
And how was it taken over there in the UK and Europe?
Well, I think the first things to mention is first the success that the NFL has in Europe and particularly in the UK. It's grown exponentially, you know, from its first start in the mid 80s to where it has become in the last 10 years, where, as you mentioned, when from one game a year 10 years ago to now we're at the point over the last 3-4 years, there's 4 teams coming a year, you know, 4 games. There has been a huge press coverage around the whole kneeling, don't kneel. And a lot of that is very much to do with, as well, the words of your president, Donald Trump.
Yes.
And regardless of whether people necessarily like who he is or don't like who he is, he has a lot to say.
Yeah.
And pretty much form of what I've been seeing very much in the UK is how it's very much he's using his standpoint to pretty much try and put a bridge in between a lot of American sports. The number one priority to sports to do that with is the NFL, largely because of its viewing base and the percentage of African American athletes within its own sport. But it's very much got huge press coverage here. The challenge that has come from it is whether the message of kneeling, not kneeling, whether it's actually become diluted now, considering it has been a year passed on since Colin Kaepernick originally started by first sitting down, and then after he met Nate Boyer, you know, the former US veteran, deciding to kneel.
Sure.
Well, I mean, I think that's going to be a huge topic about this show. I think we all, meaning Eira and I, feel strongly that it has diluted the original message, and not only in the process of diluting the original message, it's starting to really affect the fans, you know, and I think on both sides of the pond. And that's why I'm very curious, you know, how do people take it there? Do they see it? Are they seeing through, you know, all of the conversation that's being put out there by the president and other politicians? Is it impacting ratings over there in terms of the NFL? Because for sure we're seeing that's happening here. And how do fans of the game who, you know, fought long and hard to get football into London on a consistent basis, are they mad at the players? Are they standing with? Do they think what did you say? You said,
are we crazy Americans?
Are we crazy Americans?
I don't know. From what I've seen, you're not crazy Americans. It's more people are standing up and fighting for what they believe in. Firstly, I don't feel, or what I've seen, it's not affecting the NFL market here in the UK.
Yeah.
It's very, very strong. Perfect example, again, around 85,000 plus fans.
Wow.
A complete sellout. Second successive week playing in London. And to be honest, it doesn't matter what NFL team comes over here. Everybody turns up.
So
it's got this game that was on last week was on the BBC Live. Again, it also had really good. Yes. It's definitely is growing and will continue to grow. So it's certainly not affecting the spectator. I think where it is having effect often how a lot of media are trying to portray it. Here in the UK, we have a very straight-laced mentality where often political views are very much not necessarily exposed, and we try to keep sport and politics quite separate.
Sure.
Where very much in the US, it's certainly from the shows I watch, whether it's Sports Center with Michael Smith and Jamel Hill on ESPN, you sense there's much more of a environment to actually express and fully stand and be very clear on where you might be politically, or if you don't agree with something. The commonality here is it's very much, we'll treat this quite carefully as if we're walking on eggshells.
Right.
But in terms of the actual game, note the product with the NFL, it's growing here because ultimately where this city, London, wants an NFL team.
Right.
Yeah.
And
that's where it's headed.
That's going to happen within some point within the next, I would say, 5 to 10 years.
So what I'm hearing you say, it's not just that, in a way, fans overseas are kind of maybe admiring how some of the players are taking a stand, that there is that freedom to take a stand?
Absolutely. I mean, I spend a lot of time on Twitter, and whether it's retweets, quotes, there is a lot of support for players choosing to kneel and choosing to make and stand up for what they believe in. They've been given that freedom of speech, that freedom to express, the freedom to be able to do and be able to say what needs to be said and not feel threatened because of it.
Sure.
And that's one of the great powers of something like social media. It's been able to empower that. And I think what is happening now is what I've certainly seen is that a lot of are now following what Colin Kaepernick started a year ago. And it's not just across American football. I follow basketball a lot, and that it's starting to happen a lot more there. The president has made comments regarding two of its most high-profile players, one of them being LeBron James,
right,
and the other being a two-time MVP in Steph Curry, who his championship-winning Warriors team have been
uninvited
to the White House, and it's all of this is fueling more and more people to express quite freely on social media. My only concern that I'm seeing a lot of is, and I start to think about maybe Trump's kind of rhetoric has kind of moved a lot, whereas I think now his points that he made about the son of bees, effectively, any player that doesn't choose to stand for the national anthem, regardless of what the sport is, but he's clearly targeting the NFL. It's making it actually less about the original point that Colin Kaepernick decided to kneel for.
Right. So I think that's a great jumping off point to the fact that politicians have now engaged. And Marshall, I'll ask you just to join in the conversation in general, not necessarily from an international perspective, because I know you follow it no matter what. A couple of things before we jump into it. I want to welcome all those who have come on. Betsy Davis says, "Hey, Marshy," in the comment section.
Roll Tide.
And you also have another former Londonite, Elisheva Ballas, has joined us. So hi and thank you, everybody who has come on since we started. And also just a quick nod to my hat, which is my favorite hat from London, which is what I wore today.
I was about to say, it looks like a London hat.
It is a London hat, which is why I wore it.
It's just missing a Union Jack with.
Yeah, I know. I didn't wear my big Union Jack outfit, but the nod is here. I want to talk about politics and how, with President Trump jumping into the conversation, 3 weeks ago or whenever it was now, it reignited the whole thing. And it's very interesting to me that somebody like just this weekend, Marshawn Lynch, who was quietly not standing for the national anthem for quite a long time.
Right. Not kneeling, but sitting on the bench.
But sitting on the bench,
yeah.
and then making it his own personal choice that nobody really noticed. Now goes from that to walking into the locker room wearing a T-shirt that says, Trump versus everyone else. And so the politicians have sparked a lot of anger and a lot of maybe perpetuating something that didn't really need to be perpetuated for the wrong reasons, number one. And it's also engaged, and Marshall, here, some of the press has been a lot around now. Okay, so if you're going to take a knee and the owners of the football teams aren't going to do anything about that, should some of the stadiums be publicly funded?
Right.
Because, a lot of money in municipal bonds often goes into build stadiums, like billions of dollars, which...
Huge taxpayer funds goes into building these stadiums, and so many of the residents can actually afford to buy tickets to go and watch these games. And so how do you I think that's part of the interesting argument here is what's that balance? How do you reconcile as a player? I'm asking, how do you reconcile, your responsibility to the fans who really are your audience? I mean, you are playing and you're getting paid millions of dollars because you've got this huge audience that's there waiting for this. It's a huge fan base. So how do you weigh that versus your individual right to take a stand and to bring attention to something? Putting Trump aside, putting aside the politics. I mean, you are, a national or an international star. You've got a platform. Do you have a right or an obligation to use that platform to bring attention to something on the one hand, versus do you get to offend the people who are paying money or supporting you, whether it's, again, taxpayer money going to the stadiums that you get to play in, or buying these tickets and coming to spend their time to watch you and wanting to come and just enjoy the game, wanting to just enjoy the beauty of an athletic event. How do you reconcile all these different?
Well, I don't know how you do. I mean, I feel like there were players that did very quietly and in their own way. Yeah. And I want to say for the record, I think every person in this world has a right to protest. Sure. I don't think that it's about a right to protest or not protest. Yeah. For me, it comes down to, and Marshall's said this a couple of times, has the protest obscured or hidden or wiped away clean the original message? Yeah. And when the politicians now have jumped in and almost hijacked it as their own personal agenda for, now they're talking about bills going through Congress on changing rules around, municipal bonds and what stadium owners can do and not do. Yeah. Literally, does anybody really remember even the names of the police officers and the young men that were killed anymore? And
I think that's the point. I think that's what's happened a lot. It's the message has got constantly diluted, and it's become less about that original seed. Yeah. It's become more now about, hang on a minute, I serve the military, or actually I have pride in me being American, and it's important that we all stand. Well, hang on a minute, wasn't the whole point of that essential freedom to give people that choice? And it's moved away from its original message that Colin Kaepernick was about, the police brutality around certain ethnic minorities, certain black players, certain black individuals who are targeted, or that there was never convictions made on their killings or their incidents. To now it's being about, well, should you stand or should you not stand? Right. If you're not standing, are you actually becoming an issue? Yeah. And I feel that's a very, very clever political game that's being played, and it's pretty much moving the pieces of a jigsaw. Those pieces that you can't find to try and make change happen. Yeah. And it's very much been pushed to one side, and it's now all about, well, are you with us or against us?
Exactly. And it's so interesting. Two things I want to say. One is, I don't know, Marshall, if you read this over there, but, there's a couple of Congress people who are saying that the Russians are even involved in this, trying to, literally through fake Twitter accounts, trying to amp up that conversation, and not even picking one side versus another, just amping up the noise to the end of distracting the American public from anything that is going on with the Russians' involvement in our elections. It's now something that, the Senate is looking into. So I think that it could be a very politically savvy game that we're all being played on, and we're jumping right in. And that's the second point I want to make. I noticed that Jamie Hartwick just joined us, and she sent me a chain of conversation that was happening on Facebook about this. And I think who's losing out on all of this is not only what the fundamental issues are that need to be changed, but also the fans. Like, I was reading the string, and fans are hurt and angry. And I have a tweet from a fan over the weekend who was at the Chiefs Redskins game. Not over the weekend, on Monday night. And he tweeted that Marcus Peters, one of the Chiefs players, sat during the national anthem on the same day as a horrific shooting in Las Vegas. So now fans are even connecting that, like you were saying, that anti-nationalism with a tragic, horrible incident, where of course the player, I'm sure, means no disrespect,
of course,
has no, but look at what's happening. Look at what's happening to the fans, and it's like this train of conversation that was happening on Facebook. Look, I could go into the arguments that were going on between people, but it was passionate and it was hurt. You could feel it.
You could feel people are hurt. Absolutely.
So what do you guys think is happening to the fan psyche as a result of it? And will it impact all of sports? Because it isn't going to stop with the NFL, by the way.
No, it's not. We're seeing
it's definitely not stopping with you're right. We've seen it to basketball now, as well, as I mentioned earlier, and it'd be interesting to see personally, as I mentioned at the beginning, with the new NHL season starting tomorrow, how they respond as well. I feel that a lot of the incidents that are happening in the minute, and what I've also been seeing online, it is pretty much it's making it very, very difficult. And I keep pointing that we're just moving away from what was the original point and why people and why players are protesting. There's part of it that is with Colin Kaepernick's issue around police brutality. There's another about the fact that a lot of players are deciding, wait, Mr. Trump, we know about the fact that you have not got a right to make any particular comments about what we decide to do as a private organization, being the NFL. We know how best to take care of our players if a player is quote unquote dinged up. We know how best to run our business. Your job is to run the United States of America. We don't need you telling us what to do. And I think that's, personally, I also see a little tangent of him maybe, there was previous between the NFL and Donald Trump as well. He recently tried to buy, or was trying to be involved in the purchasing of the Buffalo Bills, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. I seem to remember there's a history with where he had the USFL, and that was rivaling with the. He's always had a history there. There's different phases, and I think it's really important, especially with what is happening a lot in the state right now, that emotions are high, and as you mentioned, when just because one player decides to set, it's not got any connection with what the atrocities that happen.
It doesn't at all.
It doesn't. So, is there a better way? Is there a better way to be? For example, if you're a player and you now see the backlash and you see clearly the controversy you've stirred up, and it was never your intention to make it about the national anthem or about nationalistic pride. So do you now take a stand back and say, forget the national anthem, forget kneeling at this point? What else can we do? We talked earlier about the Seattle Seahawks who came out arms interlinked.
Right.
Is there a better way to draw attention to whatever your particular cause or message happens to be? Can we move beyond the national anthem is my question.
I
or
think,
does it have to be we're going to prove our point? That right now it's really about us having the right to take a knee during the national anthem.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just want to point out, Jamie there's been a couple of comments, and I'll try and get to all of them, but Jamie just said, sports are such a point of national pride.
Right.
That it will absolutely be taken advantage of. And I think that's an amazing point, and I'm not skirting around what you just said.
Sure.
But I think that it is hard, because it's such a point of national pride, to say, how do we back off from it now? So I agree with you. I think moving forward and finding other ways.
Yeah.
And I think, of course, as with many issues and topics, this will die down. But the point is where does it leave the fans? And where does it leave the cause?
What's the
original
residue?
cause?
And
What's the residue
that gets left behind? So yes, people move on, but there's a residual anger, that gets left behind that we still have to deal with.
That we still have to deal with, and that's going to impact the sports.
Yeah.
I mean, when a fan is booing, because, and this is what bothers me, they're booing the protest.
Yeah.
Because I'll go back to the scene, and Jarvis, go ahead and hit me when you want. I don't believe that Colin Kaepernick chose the best way to make a stand about what it was he was upset about. Do I believe in the cause 100,000%? Do I believe he has the right to protest 100,000%? But I believe that the way he chose to do it would only stir up negative reaction instead of really elevating a very important topic that we should all be very concerned about.
Right. And create a whole lot of separation, which is what we've seen.
Exactly. And so, when I go back to it at that point, could he have made better choices?
Yeah.
We can't be him, and we're all human beings, and we all make our own choices. And, and I feel sadly for him, actually, because I think he's a great player, and I think he should be in the NFL. I think
100%.
It's hurt him now.
Yeah.
And he's seeing the effect of that, choice that he made.
Yeah.
But how do we protest in sports and have it be something where fans can get behind, or where the protest doesn't become the issue?
Yeah.
I don't know.
And the message gets heard.
And the message, how does it get heard?
Right.
I think that's very difficult, because with protest is naturally, it's going against nature. It's one person or a group effectively stepping out from the lines of saying, I'm not agreeing with this. And in Colin Kaepernick's case, he was like, enough was enough. It has to start with someone. And naturally with protest, it's not everyone's going to agree with it. And often whoever does put themselves out in a position, they're in the firing line. So by its own nature, it's always going to stir some level of emotion with people.
Which it should. I don't, again, I don't, I'm not saying that you shouldn't protest, and that protest isn't going to stir emotion.
Sure.
And that people are going to disagree about it. And you have to go with your heart. You have to, looking at Jamie making another comment, he went with his heart.
Yeah.
And you can't fault somebody from going with their heart.
Right. But was it effective?
Yeah. And now, like I said, there was quiet for a year and more. And now all of a sudden it's back in the public arena in a way that is so diluted.
Yeah.
That it doesn't even do service to what he did and the sacrifice he made. Marshall, when we did the show about a month ago, what turned me, because I was angry. I said this, and I was very angry at him, because I really felt like it was a big, big mistake. And then I read this great article that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar wrote about it, and calling him a patriot.
Yeah.
Because what makes him different in following his own beliefs to what could be a personal detriment, and as we've seen now,
and beliefs that this country give him the right to express.
Yeah. So I really softened my view, for sure, because I don't know that I could do that as well as he did. But I guess it goes back to your question. What's the balance when you're an athlete and you are on TV every week, or you have a platform on which you can express your views in a louder, more amplified ways? How much more responsibility do you have to not only the cause, but also to your fans?
Right.
I don't know. Do you have more responsibility because you have fans that are buying the tickets and helping you make all the money that you make?
I think you're really in a no-win situation as a player or as an athlete. It's, if you're, even LeBron James has recently said it by the fact that, he'll still stand, but he'll use his contacts, his platform to make message and spread the ability that sport unifies. And in this difficult time, it's about that unity, that sportsmen and women across all genres of sport stay connected and don't use politics to divide. Now, naturally, there'll probably be some Cavs fans who are Trump supporters or don't agree with what a lot of people kneeling or him even speaking out. But he understands that he has that platform to be able to speak and be a voice to many respects of people who don't have that same opportunity, platform, or environment to express the same things that he's feeling.
And that's a great point. And how much as an athlete do you have to take on and suck up the burden of being a voice for millions of people? Like you're right. It's a big
responsibility.
Big responsibility.
And some are willing to take the consequence. I think Colin Kaepernick was very clear on what some of the repercussions could be and was very willing to move forward with the stand that he thought was important and powerful, and he was willing to deal with the consequences, however inappropriate
how they may be. Yeah. I want to bring up another kind of topic that connects with the athlete's responsibility. This past weekend also, there were 2 young high school football players that decided to not stand during the national anthem, who were immediately removed from the game almost in an embarrassing way. They had to take off their jerseys and they had to walk without their clothes on back to the locker room, and there's been a lot of conversation on both sides. Was the coach, who also happens to be a pastor, too hard on them? Should they have had the right? We could go back and forth on that. I feel like that's irrelevant. I think what's interesting to me here is the idea that here are 2 young kids who are watching this whole thing play out.
Right.
Okay. And they made a choice, which is admirable that they did. But at 16 or 15, do you have enough life experience to understand? Do you need to have enough life experience to understand what the consequences might be?
What you're doing, why you're doing it. I mean, were they clear on why they were taking, a knee? Is it because you're following suit? Is it because you have a particular message that you want to express? And and I think also there's a whole other argument here, which is there's a code of conduct at that school, then you need to follow it if you're part of the team, right? Much like with the NBA, who has a very strict policy.
Exactly.
That requires their players to stand for the national anthem. So if you don't do that, you are not following the terms of the contract that you signed and committed to honoring as part of your employment package.
Right.
Right?
So what is that telling? Is it a catalyst for change? Is it a good thing that these kids are learning at an early age to stand up for something they believe in?
Right.
Do they understand it? Was it the responsibility, or should athletes even be thinking, like, how is this impacting, youth athletics?
Because again, at the end of the day, where are we going with this? So we've gotten thousands of people to take a knee, and at the end of the day, what have we accomplished?
Right. What's
the positive impact? I mean, we look back at the last year, for example. Let's start with Colin Kaepernick and the message he was trying to bring, to the surface here. What positive changes have we seen in terms of police brutality and police training and, number of shootings that have taken place? I mean, what has happened, and what do we expect to have happen with increased number of players taking a knee?
Well, listen, I have to say that I don't think you can expect massive change in a year. I think that we still might be very much on a road to change because of Colin Kaepernick, and that only time will tell 20 years from now whether or not that sparks something that really, I'm hoping that what sparked things is that, police departments looked at how they handle situations and do it better.
Right. We're hoping.
Yeah.
And we don't know.
And again, I'm sorry. I know I keep asking questions that I don't know that I can answer. I think it's worth saying again, though. Are these 2 kids amazing because they decided to stand for something despite what could happen?
Yeah.
Is it incumbent upon an athlete at the level of a LeBron James or Colin Kaepernick or Marshawn Lynch or any of these players who have that kind of stage to also voice what happens, the reality of what happens when you protest?
Right.
Is protesting the only way to make your voice heard?
Sure.
Many of the criticisms that these players take is that they're multimillionaires.
Yeah.
Do something with your money. Stop turning your nose up at America and do something with your money. Now, I'm not saying I agree, but where are those messages coming out? Are you seeing that, Marshall, at all on the other side of the pond?
What I am seeing is that it's not all about the money. I mean, you only have to look at the recent incident that Michael Bennett went through in Seattle, the defensive tackle there for the Seattle Seahawks, when he was stopped by police officers in Las Vegas after the exhibition, we won't call it a boxing fight, of Mayweather and McGregor. And it's very much what I have been seeing. It's people's, oh, well, it's okay for you, you're a millionaire, you don't have the same problems as I do.
Yeah.
Actually, that's a perfect example of where stuff like that, actually, we do face the same problem. Or even when, I remember in the last year, Serena Williams posted on Facebook about her nephew being stopped, by police officers. And she shared how, she tried to help educate him and her fears for the next generation. Again, what's that got to do with money? That's nothing to do about that. That's all about to do with the fact that it could be any human being at any point, at any time, in a place where, they may be minding their own business, but they might just be not in the right place at the right time. And so that's the message that I'm seeing from here. It's a lot of people, it's really about these particular stars. And as you said, when they're in a position for that, for a particular reason, they have the platform, they have the environment, they have, whether it's 5, 10, 15 million people plus on social media, they have the ability to be like, this isn't good enough. We've got to force some form of change.
Sure.
And it's often when people are willing to make enough noise, that stuff, at least people start to look at what needs to be changed.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen overnight. It can't happen overnight. But what it is, you'll notice how it will be in maybe 5, 10, 15 years, in the same way how it probably was like with civil rights back in the 60s. Or anything that requires change.
I think that is very well said. I want to acknowledge, we've had lots of comments, and I really appreciate everybody on Facebook who's commenting. And I would encourage everybody to take a look at the comments after the show as well and keep the conversation going. Zippy is talking about also it's a fine line with anybody who is a public figure, whether you're sports or music. You do have a responsibility, but it's a very fine line. Yeah. Jamie's also commenting it is bigger than just 2 teenage boys, that there's a real problem in this country. I want to say that what I've learned just out of this conversation, and when it comes back to almost the circle back to what happened in Las Vegas, I'm now going to connect a completely not random, but different topic of like gun control. I think what the world is feeling right now is that you have to stand up and say something. You cannot just sit along the sidelines anymore. Yeah, right. The sidelines of your own personal life, the sidelines of a football field, the sidelines of a basketball court, and be okay with what's happening in the world. And, so somebody like me who feels strongly that, people shouldn't be walking around with AK-47s, you know what? It's time for me to get off the bench. And I don't. Yeah. And so I think that on top of the controversy that's being stirred, and maybe the fact that the original message that Colin Kaepernick was trying to impress upon us might have been diluted a little bit. Yep. He certainly has stirred something up that's making me want to get out and talk more. Jarvis, are you getting ready to say something?
Yes, I want to say something.
Please.
I've been listening to not just this show, but a lot of shows, and we talk a lot about I hear people say, what the issue is, what the problem is, but nobody ever says what it is. Yeah. What the issue is that we're talking about innocent civilians that are being killed, murdered. Yeah. That's what the issue is. And it's like, it's funny that we talk about this, but nobody ever says that. Yeah.
But that's the point, isn't it? That it got obscured. That's a very strong point.
Well, it gets obscured.
It got obscured, but to Jarvis's point, that was not the very clear message, even from the very get-go. It's like, I'm on my knee to make it clear that innocent
Innocent
black
people.
civilians
yes,
are
that's
being
what he
murdered.
said. He said that initially from the very beginning.
Right.
He said it's not about the flag. It's not about,
Yeah.
he said that and so we have allowed them to change the narrative.
Sure.
And what I'm saying, the reason why I'm saying what I'm saying now is, to a certain degree, we're doing the same thing.
Yeah.
We're saying, there's a problem. But what's the problem? Let's say what it is. Well, that's an issue.
Yeah.
Even when we say police brutality,
We're
we're
covering
talking
it
about
up.
murder.
Yeah.
I mean, brutality is one thing, but we're talking about innocent
Yeah.
women and children
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
are being killed, and no one is paying any cost. And, we never see anyone get convicted or anything.
Right. Right.
So my thing to people that are listening and so forth, put yourself in someone else's shoes. If it was your son, your daughter, your cousin,
Sure.
put yourself in someone else's shoes, that these are innocent people without a weapon that are
Right.
being killed, and we're seeing it live on TV.
Right. Which is
I mean,
a whole nother
Right. So
big issue.
I'm just upset that people are not upset about that as much as kneeling
Exactly.
for the flag.
But that's the whole. Listen. You're not going to get an argument, I think, from anybody here, because that's the whole point.
Yeah.
That's
We
the
aren't
whole
talking
point.
about that.
That's what's so frustrating. Is it has become like literally, these are the headlines. There was a whole article written about who did what this week.
Yeah.
What team stood?
Who took a
knee? Who
Yeah.
didn't?
Yeah.
There's not that, and anything that's frustrating.
Oh, and let me say this. I'm
Please.
going to show a picture for everyone.
Okay.
It's not just African American
No.
people.
Right.
We're speaking of police brutality and police killing of white, Mexican.
Yep.
It goes across racial
Absolutely.
lines.
Right.
So that's the other thing that's upsetting, that we're allowing them to. We're allowing this divide and conquer. They're separating, but it's really a human rights issue. It's
Exactly.
just that it's happening predominantly more for people of color, minorities, and things like that. But it's happening across the board. So I want people to really get that point, that it's not just minorities or African Americans or Hispanic. It's white, it's Jewish. It goes across racial, color, class lines.
Absolutely. Very good points.
Jarvis, you couldn't have spoken up or said it better. For you, who's usually quiet, we appreciate it, because that's the truth, and that's why we wanted to
At
do
the
this
end of the day,
show,
that's
because
the bottom line. Yeah.
it is the bottom line, and it's so Marshall has said it, you've said it, we've all said it. Everybody on, you got a big standing ovation from people on Facebook, Jarvis. I just want you to know. So I just looked down and saw big hand claps.
I love it.
But no, it's why we wanted to bring it up.
Yeah.
Because we've been watching this, and we've been saying,
yeah.
what's the point?
Yeah, exactly. What are we really talking about?
What are we really talking about? And when every headline, when there is an
It can't
article,
be that we would rarely even see the national anthem televised. And now it's televised, and people tune in just to see who's standing, who isn't.
who's being
Yeah.
divisive, who
Yeah.
isn't, who's being unified,
Yeah.
who isn't.
Yeah.
A whole article in the New York Times.
Right.
They took up a lot of column space to
Exactly.
go over which teams did what this weekend.
Yeah.
I mean, my God, there's a lot more happening. And if it's true that we believe that that sports is a metaphor for life,
Right.
what is this talking about in terms of who we all are outside? I mean,
So maybe we put it out there to the media and say, rather than giving us a list at the end of each weekend saying this is who stood and this is who didn't,
Right.
maybe just give us a list of all the people who were killed. Let's move on.
Amen.
Yep.
Amen. Marshall, do you have any parting words for us over here? First of all, I want you to say you brought in the London crowd. Just really quickly, we've got Charles Nahal, who I haven't seen in ages,
Charlie.
and Danny Hart's on, and Homa Alliance. These are all people that we're very excited to have tuned in. We hope that you guys we hope that you guys will stay up late in a couple of weeks and watch us again. But we understand if not, because I should have also said it's like midnight in London right now.
Yeah,
So
you guys are amazing.
Unfortunately, I'm a night owl. It's all good.
yeah. Well, so are a bunch of our friends apparently. So we really appreciate. But do you have any parting words? We'd love to have you again from a perspective of the international side of things. And actually, we do want to do. We've talked about doing some shows on sports that people aren't so familiar with.
Yeah.
Like I would love to do a rugby and a cricket and like just talk about. There's so many amazing dynamic things going around.
Absolutely. So great.
With sports around the world.
Yeah.
So we might
We'll have
call on
Marshall
you
back.
again.
Yep.
Marshall back, and maybe you
with
can
cricket,
bring some people.
You've got the Ashes coming up in November. So to any listeners who don't know what the Ashes is,
it's a
oldest
cup that's
form
this
of-
big. No,
It's
seriously.
it's a burnt pair of bells from about 150 years ago, and it's only played between England and Australia.
Yeah.
And England currently hold it, and they will be doing their best to defend it. Matches in Australia.
I actually think that's where I cut. That's where I cut my teeth on cricket. Yes. I think was you and I watching the Ashes, and you trying to explain it to me because I couldn't understand why something had to be played over like 5 weeks time.
5 days.
Yeah, 5 days. And,
Americans don't get draws, do they?
No, we don't.
Yeah. There's an art form in drawing the game of cricket, and the rugby season started off again. It's again very popular in this country.
Is Sean still coaching?
What's that?
Is Sean still coaching?
He is indeed.
Well, maybe
he's still the coach at Wasps. Oh, sorry, at Wells, beg your pardon.
Maybe you can rope him in and we can bring him on and get rugby some exposure in the U.S.
With him as well, actually.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
I think that'd be a great insight.
Okay, Marshall, you have 30 seconds to give your final thoughts.
My final thoughts would be, Jarvis really hit the nail. Let's keep to the original message. It is about awakening more change, about really focusing on there are innocent people that are getting murdered, killed, beaten, and it's not acceptable. It's not about people being patriotic and not agreeing in the flag. It's about athletes using their platform to make social change in the world.
Thank you. Eira?
No, I agree. We as viewers have a responsibility to not get lost in all of the noise and to really make it a point to be clear on what the message is that's being brought to our attention and to decide, like you said earlier, we have an obligation to do something about this.
Yeah, and my last note is get off the sidelines, people. Yeah. Get off the sidelines, and I include myself in that because whether you have a platform that is as big as the Super Bowl field or an NBA arena, it doesn't matter. We all have voices and we all can be heard. And when people don't make their voices heard, that's the real...
That's a danger.
That's what we should be talking about in the papers, okay? Listen, we're going to be back in 2 weeks. First of all, I want to thank you, Marshy, for staying up extra late. And it's always just a joy. I almost have tears that I have to say goodbye to you. But please join us again. Jarvis, I want to thank you, as always, for being our security blanket, but we really do appreciate your thoughts and comments and you jumping in. It means a lot. We view you as a real big part of our show, so thank you. Our next show is on October 10th in a couple of weeks.
October 17th.
Oh, sorry.
2 weeks from today.
2 weeks from today. Yeah. God, I'm telling you, I want to do a show every week.
You do.
I keep doing this.
You just have to be here every week.
I do have to be here every week.
2 weeks from today, October 17th, 3 p.m.
All in good time, Win. All in good time.
Yeah,
exactly.
You know me. I'm an Aries. I jump ahead real fast.
Yeah.
We are going to be talking about nutrition in sports. Yeah. We really want to take a deep dive into that because we all struggle with nutrition. And when you are at any level of sports, it's important to keep your body fortified and able to keep going. You can like us on our Facebook page, the Distillery Inc. We have a YouTube channel. Please subscribe where you can hear all of our shows after they're posted. We are on iTunes. We are on Castbox, and we are the DistilleryInc.com. Have a wonderful 2 weeks, everyone. Thank you so much for everybody who tuned in today.
Till next time. Goodbye.
Bye.
In the future, talk radio will actually educate, inspire, and make you think. The future is now. Topics and music that affect your life from Universal Broadcasting Network. Tune in at ubnradio.com.